Welcome to It's Meseidy, honest conversations for freedom-minded women. I'm your host, Meseidy, and every episode I invite a guest to discuss topics such as femininity, relationships, the culture war, self-reliance, politics, and freedom. And let's be honest, whatever else I'm in the mood for. So pop in those headphones, pour yourself a beverage, and settle in. Let's get this episode started. I have a little thing over here to do a quick intro so I don't end up rambling, because I do that if I'm not guided in some way. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, welcome to another episode of It's Meseidy. And I am super excited for our guest today, Hayden Wilson. She is a financial advisor out of Greenville, South Carolina. She has a passion for helping families, women to get financial stability, independence. She's also an accredited asset management specialist designation. Is that correct? Because that was like a mouthful.
It's a mouthful.
I was like, let me sure I get this straight.
Yeah.
And so today we're going to hit on a few topics. One that is on everyone's mind, I think, because of our current financial status as a nation. Inflation. That rhymed. I didn't do that on purpose. So we're going to hit on that first, talk about a few other things, and kind of see how this conversation flows and takes us. But before that, do you want to take a moment to introduce our listeners to you and what kind of like your passions and interests are?
Absolutely. And thanks again, Meseidy, for having me on here today. I'm super excited to be discussing all things money and finance with your viewers and listeners. So like a little bit of background. Sorry if you hear kitty cats in the background.
I have one too. It's okay. And dogs.
Yes. They're excited to be here too. But yeah, a little bit of background on me. I started finance about a little over 2 years ago. And how I got into it is I was actually pre-med all throughout college. And I wanted to help people solve their their health goals, meet their health goals, fix their problems and that knowledge standpoint. But then I really found that I just was not passionate about medicine. I'm a little crunchy. So I'm the kind of person that it's going to take me days to take ibuprofen if I have a headache. Like I really did not. Yeah. So I'm very much, a little anti-medicine, which isn't great for a doctor. And I had to go back to the drawing board of like, okay, what do I like about medicine? What led me to this? And is there something else that I can do that'll be similar? And so I thought about, okay, well, I like helping people fix their problems and I like helping people meet their goals. And something I also really like is personal finance and investing. So I decided, hey, let's go into that because I still get to work one-on-one with my clients, help them meet their goals and fix any problems that come up along the way. So that's how I got started and just kind of dove right in, and here we are.
It's funny. I kind of have a similar story because my undergrad started as legal studies because my plan was to be an attorney. And then I worked for attorneys, discovered that I didn't really want to do that, but I still had I like that hustle and bustle and I still have that interest of law and history and everything like that. And then somehow I think I turned in because I got into culinary, which is also very driven and kind of abusive. In the sense of like, you're just doing long hours and you're on your feet and it's just like a lot of work, but it had its similarities, but it was just something that seemed completely different and like offshoot. You know what I mean?
Do you ever get people, they ask you also like, what do you do? I know you were pre-law in college and you're like, oh, now I'm in culinary. And they're like, what? It happens to me all the time with the finance. So
yeah, along the topic of finance, I think there's a lot of talk lately about the topic of inflation. Apparently, we're going to be paying the most for a turkey this Thanksgiving that we have in a long time, is the rumor.
It's so funny you say that because a few months ago, they said that we were having the cheapest 4th of July hot dog ever on record. So
yes. What was it? 33? Was it 15 cents?
15 cents or something crazy like that. I was like, ooh, we're really saving a buck or two. No, I'm so glad that you brought up inflation because I think it is the thing that's on everyone's minds. And, regardless of them saying that this is not something we should worry about, this is absolutely something that we should be worrying about. So, I'm sure all of your listeners have probably started noticing at the grocery store, milk is a little bit more expensive than it used to be. And so is toilet paper. Rip on that one. And like this is the weirdest thing. I have an obsession with apples and my Red Delicious apples went up from $1.99 to $2.99. And I was very upset. I mean, that's like what, like a 30% increase.
That's insane.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That is insane.
So, okay. For now I like to know that I know everything, but I don't know everything, especially when it comes to money, finances, anything that requires a number, unless it's like turning ounces into gallons or whatever. Yeah. I seem to be able to work it that way. We all have a general idea of what is inflation or, we know it means that stuff is more expensive.
Right.
But if you were to explain to someone who did not know what inflation was and what causes inflation, how would you explain it to them?
Well, we first saw inflation, during the Great Depression. I think that's the one that we learn about all in school. And we learn they started printing a lot of cash. And then because they printed a lot of cash, it just decrease the price of the dollar. And then, people were standing in bread lines because they couldn't even afford the bread at the store. So now we're seeing the same thing again. After COVID, we had a lot of stimulus, we had a lot of fake money, and honestly, our debt has gone to up the wall. I don't even remember what it was recently. Was it like 28 trillion? Yeah. Something crazy like that. Absolutely crazy. That was a trivia question the other week, and I was very proud of myself for getting it right.
Girl knows her stuff. It's like,
the debt has gone up the roof, and we're seeing a lot of this blowback. I mean, some of it probably has to do with the supply chain. But overall, what we're seeing is we have too much cash, and the cash is no longer worth what it used to be. And, we have seen inflation every year. We do have inflation. It's not some sort of anomaly to have inflation, at all. But this year we saw 5.4%. That's crazy.
I think there's a difference because I think just as time progresses, like if you look at anything, a gallon of milk back in the 1950s, you know what I mean, cost whatever, 10 cents. I have no idea. You know what I mean?
Well, my grandparents always tell me about how their parents used to give them a nickel to go to the gas station and get themselves a Coke. A Coke is no longer a nickel, but that just goes to show you that the price of things has increased over time, and that's okay. It's been pretty manageable thus far. It's been, right in that 1 to 2% range, but 5.4, that's a lot. That is a lot.
The problem that we have isn't necessarily because things inflate as, as changes in the economy happen, population, demand, supply, and everything like that. Right. But the issue right now is how quickly it's happening. That's when it becomes like an inflation problem.
Exactly. And you'll even see a lot of people have reported that they've gotten a raise at work in the last year. Well, the average for that raise was 3%. Well, inflation's 5.4. So you do the math. It wasn't really a raise. It didn't even keep up with inflation. So that's just, what we're seeing right now. And it's going to impact a lot of people because inflation actually does impact, unlike what they like us to believe, it actually does impact everybody, poor, middle class, upper class. I mean, it's going to impact all of us. And I would say it's going to impact, middle down to low, the most out of any of the social class systems. So
they'll definitely feel it first because, because they don't have the expendable money to make up for the increase in cost.
Exactly. And I think, I had to go over my own budget recently, and I had, a certain amount allocated to groceries. I just had to up it about $40, I think is what I added to. But that might not sound like a lot, but $40 times 12 months, I mean, $480 a year. I just increased my grocery budget by $500. I mean, that's not a lot right now, but it might be in the future.
Well, and then the question is if it continues to increase.
Of course.
So, and then along those lines, I'm sure you have clients that have these concerns. In general, the nation is having these concerns, even though we're being told, I don't even understand the argument that it's good. I mean, have you heard these I don't even understand the logic. Can you explain to me the false logic behind inflation is good?
Yes. So a lot of people are like, oh, this is a good thing because this means we're going to be paying more to the people who are, producing these goods and services. And that's just not how it is. Okay, this is an example that everyone can understand. My hairdresser, I love her. She's told me about how hard it has been to explain to clients that she has to up the prices by about, 10 to 20 bucks per client simply because she can't get the different products she uses for our hair at the price she used to be. And I mean, it's been tough. She's had clients leave her because they're unwilling to pay the prices. Now, I don't know that they're going to find anything cheaper anywhere else, especially for the same quality, but it's not really going to be going to the workers and the actual producers here. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just going to cost more money from us middle class folk who are just trying to make it. And it'll impact a lot of other things. Like, I said that I had to add money to my grocery expenses for the month. Well, that's coming out of what I probably would have been able to invest or save at least. So,
or even spend for an extra activity or, kind of like the more, I don't want to say frivolous, but the more like entertainment, fun type aspects. Because those are the first things that you're going to pull away from
I'd much rather be able to spend that at like a brewery or maybe go do some sort of like fun adventure than spend it on,
groceries.
And then don't even get me started on gas. Oh my goodness. Like I drive a Toyota Corolla. Okay. It used to cost me maybe $20 to fill up once a week, 20 bucks. Easy peasy. It is now costing me anywhere from $30 to $40 to fill up my tiny little Toyota Corolla. So, I mean,
and I both my husband and I drive SUVs. Thankfully, I mean, we're lucky because only in the sense that I work from home. So I literally drive my car like on the weekend.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then my husband travels a lot and most of his travel is taken care of by the company. So his car also sits there for a long time. So, but not everybody has that luxury.
Oh,
so along those lines about inflation, we're all concerned about inflation. Now it's going to affect everybody.
Yes.
Like it's not really something that we can just be like, oh, this isn't my problem.
Right.
So when you are talking to your clients or to our listeners, and if you were to say, we can't get away from it, but can we mitigate it? And if we can mitigate it, how can we mitigate it?
You know what I like to show my clients first? I do what's called a personal wealth analysis. And I show them, all right, this is what you need to have for retirement. We plug in all the numbers. It gives us, this is what we need to have. This is what you're going to have if we don't make any changes. Right. And so right now, the big changes are we have to hedge for inflation. So some of them, we're wanting to hold on to a lot of cash. And this is going to be the biggest thing for, I feel like all people is holding on too much cash because the cash is what is being inflated right now. The cash is losing value. And so, holding on to all of your assets in cash, no, we need to get rid of that mindset. We got to wipe that away. Once you have your 6-month emergency fund held in cash, it's time to put everything else to work. So what I mean by putting it to work is there are lots of different ways to hedge or protect against inflation. Now, one of people's biggest things that they go to first, obviously, is invest in the stock market. So I'm sure you are at least somewhat familiar with the stock market, but stock market tends to be, that's like hedge inflation 101 for us is the stock market that can keep going up regardless of inflation. We're seeing the market right now. It's pretty high, regardless of what's going on with the rest of the economy. That's why I always like to say that a good economic indicator is not the stock market. It really is inflation. So the first thing you can do is invest.
Well, you're wanting like long-term investment.
Long-term. We're talking like we're going to put this money in this investment account, this retirement account, and it's going to sit there for the next, 20 to 40 years, and we're not going to touch it. And so a lot of people, they prefer to do this in what's called an IRA. So ladies, listen up. An IRA is a retirement account and it allows you to have tax advantages. Now, there are two types of IRAs. You have your traditional IRA that lets you put in your money before you pay taxes. Then it's going to grow tax deferred. And then whenever you take it out, you do have to pay the income taxes on the money. Now, a lot of younger people or people who feel like they're going to make more money in the future, they go for a Roth IRA. And the reason behind that is because a Roth IRA, you pay the taxes now and then you put the money in, it grows tax free, and then you pull out the money and you don't pay any taxes on it at all. Personally, I'm opting for a Roth. I'm anticipating making more money in the future. We'll see.
And you don't want to be taxed on that withdrawal when you're making more money in the future.
Exactly. I'd rather pay the money now while I'm making probably like the least amount I will in the next few years. Again, knock on wood. But like that's just like how that goes. You have those two accounts. You can put up to $6,000 into each a year. That's a great starting point for some people, especially if you don't have a 401k. Now, IRA is great for even if you do have your 401k. I always tell people what I want to see first is at least put in money in your 401k up to your employer's match. And the reason for that is because a match is free money. We love free money. We love it. So match, like if your employer is matching 100% up to 5%, you put in 5%, they put in 5%, you now have like 10% that just went in that month.
Now, this is probably, I think I know the answer to this, but a 401k is usually only through an employer.
Yes.
And if you're self-employed, you have to do like an IRA or something like that.
Yeah. And if you're self-employed, you can do an IRA. We do have what we call solo 401ks. I helped someone set that up for his, he makes vans, like those cool little travel vans.
Yeah.
So I helped him set up that. That's, another option for small business owners. I tend to prefer the IRAs over the solo 401ks whenever we're, like determining, okay, what are we going to invest into first? Only reason being you just have more control over the IRAs and more investment choices. You can put anything into an IRA. And that leads me to the next part. With your IRA, just simply opening an IRA does not mean you're invested. So you open the IRA. Step 2 is you transfer money into the IRA and then you buy the investment. So oftentimes I ask people, I'm like, so do you invest? And they're like, yeah, I have an IRA. And I'm like, oh, what do you like to put in your IRA? And they're like, money. Money.
You're like, you need to do a little, there's a follow through step there. Right?
Exactly. And it cracks me up. And I'm like, okay, here's how we're going to explain this. So your IRA is your purse. So you have your purse, and then if you want to go put lipstick, you've got to go buy lipstick to put the lipstick.
It doesn't magically appear in the purse.
Exactly. Yes, we find these things a lot in a purse, but we have to buy them first. So then you want a wallet. Well, you can go and buy a wallet and you can put that in your IRA. So that's how I like to explain an IRA. Just a common misconception right there. But yep, that kind of covers, the first steps I would take into, planning for inflation, because really inflation, when is it going to affect us the absolute most? Is going to be when we retire, 20 to 40 years from now.
So you wouldn't recommend you're saying like no to stashing it in a savings, like a standard savings account.
No, you don't want to be stashing that kind of money. I kind of mentioned before, I like to see clients and other people just have about 6 months of emergency savings saved up. But I also think that you can be working on that at the same time as saving for retirement, because, if it's going to take you a few months or maybe even a few years to get your emergency savings, you do want to still be putting away some into retirement. Personally, I always put in money to my 401k. That is just non-negotiable for me. So there might be a month where I'm not able to put away any savings at all into my emergency savings account, but I did make my 401k contribution because I don't want to miss out on that match. But that's okay. It just kind of depends on the person and the situation. Some people feel totally comfortable having 3 months just saved. And that's fine too. But I like to recommend 6 just to stay nice and conservative and have all of our ducks in a row. And then after that, really, you want to put any extra cash to work, because it's got to be sitting there. And, years from now, it won't buy you anything when you retire. That's for certain.
Yeah. Well, and especially, I mean, right now, the money that the inflated costs right now, you just kind of have to deal with them and it's
Mhm.
going to go away.
Exactly.
You can't just hold on to it and hope that it still kind of pans itself out. We still have to live our life day to day. And I know for
Exactly.
my husband and I personally, we do our investments and we do our savings too. But regarding like that 6 month emergency account, at least those bills tend to stay consistent. You know what I mean? Like your
Yes.
car payment stays consistent, your home or your mortgage stay, especially if you own your property as opposed
Uh-huh.
to like within a year, rent might go up or something like that.
It's so easy to calculate. And when I say 6 months expenses, I don't mean 6 months of like all the things that are non negotiable, like your mortgage, car payment, credit card bills, all that kind of stuff, plus all the things you spend your money on. I'm talking about like true emergency situation. You have to be able to pay your bills. You have to be able to pay for food, maybe not for dining out and drinks out on the town, but you have to be able to, take care of your family, that sort of thing.
Well, and and it's probably one of the an episode that I'll have a discussion with a friend of mine in regards to food security. But just to kind of touch on that real quick, meat prices are increasing right now
Yes, they are.
significantly. So I tell a lot of my friends, and I've even told my family, if you have direct access to a meat provider, a local farmer or something like that, get in touch, hook up with a friend, split the cost on a cow and stock up your freezer. And then that can kind of mitigate your grocery cost over several months, up to a year, depending on the size of your family. Like my house is a 2-person household. So we're eating off of this half a cow for probably a good 8 months. You know what I mean?
Yes. No, I totally support that. And, here in the South, we've got a lot of people who hunt. And, like if you're going hunting, take that doe to the meat processor and make sure you save it up and like let's freeze it. Let's like do all the things so that you are able to, survive if you need to. Here's the thing, I don't think we're heading into apocalypse or anything crazy like that, but it is just so good to be prepared and to have that peace of mind knowing that you'll be okay if anything happens or
Yeah.
even if you just
Well,
lose your job.
exactly. And I always tell people that, like, I'm not of the mindset of like, the world is, you know what I mean? Like,
Who can live like that? That would be
yeah, that's exhausting. But I just be
yeah.
like, you know what? Worst case scenario, I'm good.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And then if nothing
Absolutely.
happens, well, then I save myself some money. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Exactly.
just kind of having that mentality. I don't like the chicken little, the sky is falling situation.
Mhm.
So, but if we were to retouch on, so for mitigating the effects of inflation,
Yep. So we
don't
talked
hold on
about
to the money.
yeah.
Don't like stash it in savings. Get your 6 months or 3 to 6 months emergency finances, I guess.
Yeah,
Is that
emergency savings in check. That'll be in cash, but then everything after that, you want to put it to work and invest. And the retirement accounts, that should be your first go to. After that, you can look into like cash management accounts, which is basically what you'd find on any e-trading. But you don't want to use e-trade a lot of times for the retirement accounts because, like Robinhood, for instance, they don't have IRAs, I believe. You'll want to find a reputable firm to do that on. And then, looking past even investing, there are other ways. And you know how we can tell this? This is what the different big portfolio managers are doing right now. They're buying real estate and they're buying gold. So, people like to kind of make fun of gold, especially. No,
yeah,
that's a
because of
great
those
way.
advertisements.
Yeah, no, it's a great way. It's a tangible asset that you hold and the value of it. And it's going to pretty much keep pace, at least with inflation. Most times, I mean, that's what it's historically done. But then also, real estate. Why do we see BlackRock buying up all the houses?
No
Because it
kidding.
works great for their portfolios. So that's, what we're going to be seeing a lot. And it would be great to see some more normal people, not just big financial firms buying up the stock or buying up the real
Real
estate.
estate.
I'd love to see some mom and pa's buying up some single family housing and being great landlords to people who really need it.
Well, then I wanted to kind of along the lines of, one of the things that is believed to have contributed to inflation is
Mhm.
COVID
Yes.
and the lockdowns and people basically being paid not to work and all their restrictions and everything like that, which has really caused a lot of people to reevaluate their positions financially, their dependence on a major corporation for their income, businesses, that sort of thing, especially after we went through this, I don't know, almost a full year of just working from home, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I think it's completely changed the economic landscape. And I think in some ways, potentially for the better, because we were probably for a long time stuck in this traditional view of 9 to 5 at the office, 45-minute to 1 hour commute. You know what I mean? Like, and away from your family, daycare, that whole aspect. Like, it was for a long time, this is the way it's done. And so I think with especially women spending more time at home and their children, there are some women, at least with my own conversations with my listeners and my followers on social media, that are kind of reevaluating wanting to be home.
Yes.
Whether it is to be home full time and maybe convert to a single income family, or being home and pursuing some kind of entrepreneurial aspect where they're able to work from home and still balance the work-life situation. Have you also seen that happening over especially the last 2 years?
Oh yeah. No, I mean like so many of my friends and just even some of my internet friends love them. They come to me and they tell me they're like, I really want to be a stay-at-home mom, or I really want to be a stay-at-home wife, and I want to be my husband's partner and helping him succeed so that we're able to go to that one income. And that's really what it is all about. Is if you're going to go to one income, you have to be ready to, be the support system to help your partner be able to make up from your income, because a lot of people, it's going to be very difficult to go straight to one income right away. I actually do have a process on that. I'll touch a little bit on that because I do think women, you guys need to know this is entirely possible, because whenever you go to one income, there's so many things that are changing. I'm going to talk from the stay-at-home mom perspective. So for instance, stay-at-home moms, you don't have to pay for daycare. You don't have to pay for a cleaning service. You don't really have to pay as much on food because you have more time to cook at home and learn how to make the meals that your family loves. That's going to save money because the restaurant we see inflation, and grocery stores, restaurants are seeing it even more than we
For
are.
sure.
So
Yeah.
you can save a lot of money just even by going to be a stay-at-home mom. And then not only that, you're going to be relieving the stress from your partner. So by relieving that stress and providing this wonderful support system when he comes home from work, you're allowing him to focus on work, and you are kind of like that foundation for him to just push on through, get the promotion, do a really good job, get that raise, get that bonus. And then also something people don't really talk about is, a lot of times whenever people get promotions, they have to move. Well, that can cause a lot of strain if one partner has a job and they can't find another job where the other wants to move to. So we're adding in this extra, flexibility to be able to move on up in the corporate ladder or in the workplace. So there are lots of benefits to it, but then also a lot of women just they want to stay home and be homemakers and take care of their children. We see all this stuff going on in the school systems, not even just, getting into indoctrination or anything like that, but just, unreliability. Even here, we have parents who are getting calls at 6 a.m. saying the bus can't come pick their children up from school and they're having to miss part of work to drive them. So, it's going to relieve a lot of that stress for moms who even want to homeschool, or even if they don't want to homeschool, just being able to drive their kids to school. Their kids no longer have to wait in the bus stop. They don't have to worry about, reliability of transportation. So I know that kind of goes into an entire rabbit hole of things. So I don't know if there's anything specifically you would like to touch on there.
My goal is always to empower, especially women, to do whatever the heck they want. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So it's not that this is your best choice or it's like an either or situation. But if you do, for a long time, we have been told, especially in society, that either a woman is not truly fulfilled if she's not working outside the home, or, which is, I personally find incredibly sexist, as if a woman is unable to figure out what her own desires and abilities are, but I'm not even going to get into I'm not going to like go down that rabbit hole. But also that, we've been told that we are no longer able to be single income homes.
Yeah.
Like it's almost, it's not that it's an antiquated idea, even though some people will say that's just an antiquated and sexist or, a patriarchal idea, but that we're being told it's just financially impossible.
Yeah.
And so, or I'm wondering if it's truly like we've gotten to the point where it's actually financially impossible because of just the cost of living, or with some changes, is it something that's possibly feasible? Right. And that doesn't even mean that a woman that works from home for a time with their children while they're small and homeschooling can't pursue something independently, but still be in the home.
Exactly. And so like to first touch on, is it feasible? Well, there's a great way to find out. This is what I always have my clients who want to pursue being a single income family. This is what I have them do. So, you have husband and wife. What we start doing is we make the decision, okay, we're going to put half of the wife's salary every single month into emergency savings. We're going to do that for the next 3 months. And we're going to only live off of half of her salary and his entire salary. And then 3 months later, we're going to actually zero that even further. Like if we have to take baby steps, we can each month, we can, but the ultimate goal is a year in, we want to be only reliant on his salary, her entire salary going into emergency savings. Now, the reason why we do this, one, we're finding out if it is feasible for this family to live off of one salary and what that looks like. But we're making small changes along the way so that we're not just cutting out everything cold turkey, because there are going to be things that you have to cut out at first because you're not going to make up that income right away. But two, this is really great because it allows them to really build up that emergency savings account. Because I'm going to tell you, if it's a single income family, I like to see a little bit more in emergency savings. That's when I am going to bump it up to where it needs to be 6 to 12 months, because we have to be prepared for anything. We don't have another income to fall back on it anymore. Once you become single income, you just have one. So that's why, we're really, really filling up this emergency savings account, but then we're also getting used to living off of that one income. Now, along the way, they might figure out that, okay, she likes at least, being home a bit more, but maybe what would be more feasible for the family would be to start the wife off at part-time. My mom was a nurse she still is. She went to part-time basically as soon as we were in elementary school, and her going part-time, she only worked, 2-3 times a week, but then she was able to be there for everything from the music lessons to swim team practice to basketball. She was there for it all, but she still got to bring in enough income to make my family feel financially stable enough to handle anything. But then, other moms, they might decide, hey, I don't want to work for a company anymore. I'd like to go off on my own and maybe like do tutoring. I saw this one mom recently who she quit being a teacher and she became a full-time tutor. And now she has an entire business and she gets to teach her own kids. She gets to stay home with them and then tutor everybody else's children too. And it's a real passion of hers.
Well, and I think right now there's a huge market for that, especially since there's so many parents right now. They're interested in homeschooling, but they don't know where to begin, or they feel like they're not capable or informed enough to homeschool their children,
Well, and even like with me, my day job is as a financial advisor, but I have a side hustle. I play violin. So I play violin for churches, weddings, like any kind of event. And then I also teach private violin lessons. So that's kind of like my little artistic fulfillment there for me. And, I don't know if in the future I would want to be a stay-at-home mom, but I know one, we would have a system in place to do it. But two, if I want to keep working part-time and teach lessons or do financial coaching or anything like that, I know that I also have the resources available to do that. And it's purely my decision. And that's the big thing for women and also just for society. They need to start understanding it's not that our husbands are pressuring us to become stay-at-home moms, or it's not even like our families are. It's just a lot of us naturally want to be at home and raise our family and be there for every little special moment.
Yeah. And that's okay.
Yeah. It's not the patriarchy. It's not sexism, so it's just, overcoming that common belief that it's just, sexist to want to stay home. I happen to like making my fiance sandwiches. Thank you very much. No. So
how dare you? How dare you?
I know.
So, okay, now I'm going to take I don't know which way we're going to turn, but when I first reached out to you, and this is also kind of in the realm of investment. So it does kind of tie back to our original like investment inflation kind of topic. You mentioned something to me where I was like, you're like, oh, maybe we can talk about ESGs. And I'm like, what? I'm like, what is the ESG? Do I want an ESG? Do I drop ESG? Because it literally sounds like an acid drop to me. Like when you said ESG, I was like,
yeah,
a drug? Like, what are we talking about? So this might be a really new term to a lot of people because I know it was for me. And like I said, I think I know everything and clearly I do not. So what is an ESG? What does it stand for? Should we like them? Should we not? Like, let's do a little ESG for dummies.
Yeah. And, first of all, I'm going to say, I'm never going to tell anybody what they should support or what they shouldn't support, but I am going to give some of the information behind it and let everybody make their own decision. So ESG stands for environmental social governance. And you hear that, and what would be your first reaction?
That trend recently, the red flag trend, that is immediately where I go to. I'm like, red flag.
Red flag. Yep, you're right. I used to nickname it, when I first started in finance, I didn't think too much of it. I was like, oh, it's just like the hippie investments. It's for like the social justice warriors. That was literally what I thought. And I was like, it's nothing to worry about. This isn't a big deal. Right.
Which is, I think, been our problem for over the last, especially like 5 to 6 years, is this underestimation of that little pocket of the world.
Oh, yes. Yes, it has. Because then, I literally for over a year, I just did not think about it. And then I started thinking about it and I realized what it was doing. So ESG, the way the investments are picked, it's no longer just based off of what do we think is going to do well. Because, that's how most portfolios are managed, is portfolio managers want to get you the best return while still matching your risk tolerance, right? So that's their goal. Well, ESG is different because ESG, the investments, they get good returns, but it's not necessarily like they were picking them for that. They're picking them because they are meeting some sort of criteria that has been
some environmental or social, what does the G stand for? Governance criteria.
Some sort of like ethical, moral criteria. So maybe the criteria is like, okay, we're not going to invest in any coal. We're only going to invest in electric energy sources, windmills. I don't know. We're only going to invest in things that are, matching our criteria. Okay, that doesn't sound too bad to some people. It's like, oh, well, I like the environment. I want to help the environment. Well, maybe then they start saying like, okay, well, now the criteria is we're only going to invest in companies that support Democrats coming into office, or like they can set any criteria they want.
So any kind, there's no hard rule. So any kind of social issue is attached to the company. So it's not necessarily what they're producing, but what issues or possibly even politics that they're supporting. I mean, is that too far to?
No, that's not at all too far, because like, let's say I become a famous financial coach. Okay. And then, let's say that Target has decided to publish one of my books. I don't have a book yet, but maybe I will in the future. Target publishes one of my books and they're selling it to all of their customers. Well, let's say that on the criteria now, we can't support conservative female authors. So then this portfolio manager who has this ESG fund, they go to Target and they say, if you want us to continue putting your stock in our portfolios, you can't sell Hayden Wilson's books anymore. You have to take her off the shelves. And so that's where this becomes a big deal. It makes it entirely possible to cancel basically anything. We talk about cancel culture all the time. Well, this is basically defining the culture that is okay and what's not okay.
And that's really significant because it means, what I hear is that you're coercing or bribing a company essentially to only follow certain ideas and views. Otherwise, they're not going to have people invest into them.
Exactly.
Because they're taken out of the portfolio.
Exactly. And it's super scary to think about because it can happen to anything. It can happen to anyone. I mean, like we see how everything can be. So I remember when dairy was not really politicized, but it was publicized so much. Turns out like dairy doesn't really help us prevent osteoporosis or other
yeah,
it turns out it's not actually, well, that's just because it was promoted because the dairy industry
they came up with a campaign about it.
Exactly. And then everybody just goes along with it. Well, that's what's going to happen here. And we're letting basically the culture be defined right now. I mean, it tends to be a leftist cultural move. That's why, a lot of people on the right, if you ask a lot of people who define themselves as conservative, the first thing they're going to talk about is like, well, I'm fiscally conservative. Even I did that for the longest time because I was afraid to speak my views. I didn't want people to prejudge me, think that I was some sort of a prude or that I was like a bigot or anything crazy like that, just because I'm conservative. And I would say, well, I'm a fiscal conservative. And we think that it's enough to be fiscally conservative these days, and it simply is not. And so we're seeing that even in the ESG investing. I mean, if we're going to allow them to define what culture is
worthy of investment, that's what they're saying.
It's no longer, and like I said before, it's no longer like, we talk about a meritocracy. Well, investing traditionally has been in some way, a meritocracy. Like whenever I go and I decide I want to buy, some stock or index funds, I'm looking purely at the numbers. To be quite honest, I
would think it's like if you're taking your money and investing it somewhere that you want the money to grow. So your concern is more about the performance and not whether, like, don't get me wrong. Okay. Obviously there are situations, and I mean, this is like an outlier, but I'm not going to go and support a company. Like, look, we're just going to be honest here. I got my issues with Nike. Why do I have my issues with Nike? Because of what's going on in China and their production over there and that whole situation. I do not buy Nike. Like that's for me is just like a thing. So, but at the same time, I am determining that as an individual. There's not some kind of, structure, which is what we're talking about with these investors, that's designating and telling these companies what is good and what is wrong. And then if you don't follow these parameters, we won't give you our investors money.
You're not trying to stop anybody from investing in Nike, and that's the big difference is that you are making the individual decision not to do it for yourself. But now, like, we're basically putting the power, anybody who is in ESG, they've basically allowed the company decide their ethics and morals to some point, because what I used to describe ESG when I thought it was just like, oh, like green investing. I was like, oh yeah, it's just like, if you care for the environment, you're putting your money where your mouth is. You're really not. You're just allowing them to put your money where their mouth is. And that's the big difference. You can decide what to invest in, on your own. And that's, people say like, well, I still want to support, the environment, but I don't really want to support companies just based off of like other ethics and morals. I'm like, you can still invest in, green energy. You can still invest in all sorts of things, but you don't have to do it through an ESG portfolio that you really don't have any control over. So ESG is a huge topic for us these days. And
so it's more ESG of more like a package deal as opposed to I, as an individual saying, yes, I want to invest in X company because they're doing good things in, electric or, conservation or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Now, these ones are clumping every social justice issue into a general package.
Yeah. Exactly. And they'll say that the biggest thing is like, oh, they perform pretty well. And they do. They pretty much perform like any other index fund would, to be quite honest. Like they're not underperforming. I wouldn't say they're necessarily overperforming, but like they just kind of depends on the day, obviously, but they're going to give you that return. And so that's why I say, I'm not going to tell anybody what they should do, because again, just because I don't support it does not mean I think that I should decide what you support. But it's just good to know that what you are doing is actually enabling companies to control the cultural moment, as you will. You're giving them more of that power and control by continuing to put your money in those types of investments. And
It's an interesting, almost corporate. I don't know. Is this like an over? What is the word I'm looking for? When you kind of overreact or whatever, but like a social credit kind of system for corporations.
It is ushering in a social credit system, and it's doing it through money, which is, I mean, honestly, let's be real. Money drives everything in the world right now. And this is just part of it. It's going to help continue ushering that social credit system because, again, like let's say that you are a big time chef and you are now like selling all of your products and it's like international. You've developed like an entire system. Well, then they find out, oh, you have a podcast that we don't agree with all the time. And let's see, the Food Network is sponsoring you. Oh,
they need to drop me.
Food Network, and they say, listen, if you want to continue to have your stock sold by us, then you're gonna have to take our show off. You're gonna have, and so that's really what it is they will have the ultimate control, and like it's just.
Now, are you saying that this is because I think, and I have these discussions a lot, like I have an online women's community, and we have these discussions a lot where, things are happening right now. And I think we as a society tend to not, either because we haven't been taught history or forgotten history, tend to not be able to see what something can eventually turn into.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So are you saying that this is something that in your opinion or your view is something that could potentially happen, or is this something that's pretty much happening?
I mean, I think it's definitely already happening. I think it could get much worse. I don't think it's rolling down the hill yet, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
But we are pushing that barrel up the hill right now with this. And every step gets closer to, it becoming unstoppable. Because what happens when, let's say like 70, 80% of America is now invested wholly in ESG? What happens to all the other?
Then you're only getting like one side of whoever's designated, and whoever is that's doing the investment is the one that's going to determine what messages or what brands, campaigns, or whatever are going to see the light of day, so to speak.
Exactly. And like that's really what this affects the most is people who are investing in those portfolios. They're not, and they're like allowing their portfolio to be managed for them, either passively or actively. It's not the same, we're always going to have people who hold stock. And that's why I say, like we're not entirely there yet. But we're starting to see this huge culture shift amongst young people to where we're all about those index funds and we're all about, just buying little bits and pieces. Well, what if all those bits and pieces are now ESG? It's just something to think about. And, right now we can stop it. We can, make moves to, by even just making our own personal decisions of, me, I'm never going to be in an ESG portfolio. I don't care if it's getting me 20% and my other portfolio is getting me 12. It does not matter to me. I will still stay in my other portfolio.
Because it's an issue of principle for you personally.
Yeah, it's a principle thing. Nike stock, I mean, they can do pretty well sometimes. I know they dropped quite a bit during the whole Lil Nas X incident and a few other things. But, still, like some people bought during the drop,
because honestly, if you think about it, that's the way you should do it. But the issue is like, why is it dropping? Yeah,
like me personally, I didn't like that Nike was involved in any of that. So I didn't buy the drop, but maybe someone else who they only see numbers, they're a numbers person. They don't care about any of the principle behind it. So they were like, oh, great. it's on sale. Let's buy some. So, and that's why I always say, I'm not going to tell anybody again, what to support, what not to support, but it's good to understand everything because like I said, even I, like during the first year working in finance, I just thought it was a great, like, oh, it's like a hippie fund. Like, oh, it's just like for like all the social
justice. And I think a lot of times that's one of the things that kind of gets us into the situations that we find ourselves in now, because what is it that say the road of good intentions is what? Something about pay. I'm really bad. I can never remember sayings or whatever, but you know what I mean? Like you have good intentions and then they go to crap. You know what I mean? It's essentially what it is. And so initially it sounds like a good thing. I mean, even back in the day when you said the term social justice, you're like, okay, or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I want people to be treated fairly. That sounds good to me. Like I want everybody to get along. That sounds great. But then you start diving deeper into what it actually means and you realize,
or at least how it's trying to be implemented. And then that's kind of where you run into the issues. And then I wanted to ask you this question real quick before we finish up. But since, okay, maybe I have my little tinfoil hat on right now. Because sometimes I feel like I don't even like conspiracy or anything because it makes me uncomfortable and I'm very much a logical person. However, this ESG thing, like I said, sounds like a social credit system for corporations. Do you see this, and this is just me working through an idea, as a possibility of preparing people for social credit as individuals? Like, will financial institutions determine themselves, like who they're going to be willing to work with, who they're going to provide loans to, who they're going to finance, depending on their social credit?
It could. I don't think we're anywhere close to that quite yet. But I mean, think of it this way. What if they decide, all right, we're only going to trade with trade companies that support critical race theory and have to teach all of their employees. So we might not see it right away, but we're going to see it through the companies that we work for who are being traded by all of these portfolio managers, right? So like we're going to start seeing bits and pieces of it. Well, eventually, let's say you lose your job because you can't get down with the critical race theory and like transgender and all the crazy things going on. Then you don't have any money. So of course you're going to be treated differently. But I do think it could eventually lead down to the social credit system. We're creating infrastructure with it right now. Like the closer and closer we get to anything with like vaccine passports, that's creating infrastructure for social credit. And that's what I always like to warn people is like, we think that things don't matter right now, but we're creating the process and the infrastructure for things that are much worse later on.
Well, and I think it's just one of those things of the adjusting your baseline, you know what I mean? Where at a base, we are expecting one thing, but change does not happen drastically. It happens bit by bit. And then every time you're just kind of like, oh, it's just this, or it's just that. And then the next thing you know, it's just converted into this massive thing. And then your baseline has shifted. So what was not acceptable a year ago, you've slowly allowed yourself to be conditioned into it being okay today, with a lot of people not even realizing it. It just kind of happens passively.
I love that term conditioning because that really is what's happening now. Even just like with the ESG, we're conditioning people to think it's not that big of a deal. It's really just another form of investing and it has pretty good returns. But when you dive deeper and you start looking at what this could implement or mean in the future, that's when it gets scary. So
yeah, for sure. Well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up, but thank you so much for this conversation. This was fun. And who saw it? Look, I'm not a money person, but even like, this was a good chat. I enjoyed this. Where can people find you if they want to follow you? Is there anything that you got in the works that maybe you want to share?
Yes. So you should definitely follow me on Instagram. That's where I post a lot of financial tips. That's how Meseidy and I found each other.
Yes.
So my Instagram handle is at Hayden C. Wilson. So that's HAYDEN, C as in cat, Wilson, Wilson. You should follow me on there. That's where you're going to see a lot of everything going on. And that's also where you're going to find any updates. We spoke about single income families. That's something that I'm actually working on for a course for all of my ladies who are following me who would like to go on that path towards becoming a stay-at-home mom or just a single income family. So that's where you can find most of the information. And then if you have any specific questions, feel free to email me at haydencwilson@gmail.com.
And I will be sure to have the link to her Instagram and her email in the show notes below. Thank you again so much, Hayden. And you guys stay tuned in 2 weeks for another episode. Thanks so much for listening to It's Meseidy, honest conversations for freedom-minded women. You can find the show notes for this episode at itsmeseidy.com. And if you're loving the podcast, I would be so honored if you would go ahead and hit that subscribe button and leave me a 5-star review. And community of women founded on the values of femininity, self-reliance, and freedom. You can also connect with me on Instagram at itsmeseidy or join my email list. Until next time, stay free and stay honest.